So we have another interesting speaker here from Hassel. Gus is a researcher, is a people's person, and a tech enthusiast. Can you just explain us your experience or just talk about it?
One of the insights is that collaboration and this connectivity allows you to have many ideas. So the fact that we're so connected with Sydney allows to generate a lot of volume of ideas.
Yes.
But isolation allows to have diversity of ideas, unique ideas, because if it takes you 42 days to get to Sydney, you incubate that idea in a very specific way that when you arrive it is so unique in its way that it will be unique in its sense rather than a build-up of back and forth of emails and phone calls and so on.
How do you think collaborations are going to change in the future? So with the use of tech and with the use of tools like Atlassian and all the other collaboration tools, the communication between the teams and the people, or even like the idea generators, it's getting more closer and closer, right? So if you see from your journey from isolation to the web collaboration, what do you think will be the future of collaboration? How do you see it?
Well, the word collaboration is very broad, and we use it as a very generic term to encompass all the different ways in which we interact. So perhaps the next step forward should be to recognize the granularity of interactions. So not because two people are in close proximity, they're collaborating. We cooperate, coordinate, delegate, and all these different ways in which we interact is very important to understand because they follow different hierarchical structures and trust levels.
Absolutely.
So the way you design space or the type of technology that you will use to collaborate are very different to the ones you use to coordinate or cooperate. And it's once we recognize these differences, then we can develop specific environments, whether they are in the digital platforms or space-to-face. One rule of thumb that I like to use is if the digital technologies don't feel good enough to communicate the message, that means that you're really collaborating, because collaboration is very depends a lot on proxemics and non-verbal communication, the way people interact and how people move and so on. So the bandwidth of that message cannot very well be codified and travel through digital networks. Whereas if what you're doing is just transferring information, that can be codified very well. That's what information is, just codified, and you can send it through digital networks like email, phone calls, and so on. So it depends on the nature of the message and the purpose and the outcome of the output, is if it's to collaborate or just to exchange information.
What sort of suggestions do you have for the next stage of entrepreneurs when it comes to your experience of bringing isolation and collaboration and all these parameters that you have learned over your journey?
That's a good question. Also to understand that there's a human need to be amongst others, even if you're not collaborating with them.
Absolutely.
So co-working, there's a very interesting way of describing. Someone came up with this term that is working alone together. So a lot of people in co-working, they go and work there not because they're interacting with others. This idea that in co-working spaces everybody's interacting and talking, yeah, that might happen, but eventually the system settles down and people just do whatever they do. But they like to be there we're social creatures. And isolation has a very, even though I cherish it as a way of increasing diversity of ideas, can also be very taxing as human beings, which are very social. So you can see it also even before co-working. People tend to gather and work at coffee shops. From the 16th century, people used to go to the equivalent of coffee shops just to work and exchange ideas. Not because two people are in close proximity, they're collaborating. That doesn't mean that interaction is not important. So yes, we should put a value in collaboration, but also in the social systems that promote and underpin work.
That's a really different way of thinking because you're a researcher, you're a PhD, that particular theory of thought is more provoking and make you think what's going to be the future. So that's wrapping up for today's talk with Gus from Hassel. If you see the evolution of the workspaces or the evolution of human interaction or collaboration, it clearly explains from his experience or knowledge how it has evolved and what's going to be the future. So there is a disconnect between people and their sentiments or emotions. Right now, we're only communicating information, data between the people with using web technologies. But will the future of collaboration be more sentimental and more closer? Like, make actually people feel that they're closer, not just with the data, but also with the sentiments and with the emotions of the people.